Hey everyone, we're back. It is me, your co-host of Cinema, or your host of Cinema Crusaders, Nemesis, D.W. Howard, and we are here today to talk about a movie that has a lot of relevance to what's going on today. It wasn't exactly planned that way on your part of your host, but as I rewatched it, I think we're going to have some very interesting stuff to talk about, because today we're going to talk about the Terry Gilliam film from 1995, 12 Monkeys, starring Madeline Stowe, Brad Pitt, and Bruce Willis, among others. So with that, I'm going to introduce my co-host, and then we're going to get right into this thing and get going. So first, I want to introduce the famous host of Awesome Sauce Radio. I was so pleased to be a guest of his on his radio show the other day, his UCPN show. Yep, none other than the one, the only, Blind Adam. How you doing, Adam?
I'm doing good. Having a very relaxing Labor Day weekend, and happy to be here. Thank you for letting me come on.
No problem. Outstanding. All right. And then I'm going to bring him in. The one, the only, the man who's killing it at Omen Comics. He knows everything about writing, science fiction, and more. You know him. You love him. Steve, Shadewing Sellers. How you doing, Steve?
Doing great. I'm looking forward to talking about the Army of the 12 Monkeys in a future that takes place, I believe, like 14 years ahead of now. That should be great.
Yeah. And then, last but not least, he is an incredible artist. He's an incredible writer. He's featured in the book Perspectives, which is now out for ASAP Comics, and I know he's doing writing and commissions. He's a wonderful guy, also on Sloppy Spoilers podcast, and he's my friend. Let's welcome Jeff Bracey. How you doing, Jeff?
Who are you people again?
I have never met this man in my life.
I'm having a divergent mind. That's it. Yes.
That is an
constructed reality.
That is an excellent segue into the movie we're covering today. We're going to be talking about 12 Monkeys by Terry Gilliam, and there's a couple of very interesting things I want to hit on first before we go into the plot of the movie, and then we're going to start breaking this movie down. First of all, this movie came out a couple of months after the movie Outbreak, which is really odd that two pandemic movies came out at the same time. And yes, there was some stuff going on in the early 90s. We had hantavirus in the United States. We had Ebola going on in Africa. But it was always seen as a thing that was a possible threat, and it was way out there in the future. You know, it wasn't something we necessarily had to worry about. In fact, I think most people were probably more worried about AIDS here and the possibility of maybe Ebola getting here from Africa or something like that. So these two movies came out, and the studio was very surprised that 12 Monkeys took off. They were not expecting this film by Terry Gilliam to do much at all. And Terry Gilliam had done Brazil, and Steve could talk about this a little bit. After his experience with that, he really didn't want to do this movie. You know, he wasn't super excited about it. And you can definitely see the Terry Gilliam's hands all over this movie, especially in the future. You know, and we'll get to that in production. So this movie, the title is a little bit of a red herring for those of you who haven't seen it. 12 Monkeys references the Army of the 12 Monkeys, and you are led to believe through most of the movie that the Army of the 12 Monkeys is responsible for this post-apocalyptic future where a virus has wiped out 5 billion people. That's right, billion with a B. And most of the rest of the humanity has gone underground, and the planet now belongs to the animals again. And Bruce Willis' character is being sent back at different points through time, and they're sending all sorts of people back to try and find a pure sample of the virus so they can engineer a cure. Does that sound familiar to anybody? As we're trying to figure
theory, out? I have a different theory about that.
Okay, but we're trying to figure out where a virus came from and the origins of a virus and things like that. So, long story short, and I don't want to, this is not a spoiler show, so I'm not going to get too much into it. I'm sure we're going to talk about some of the details later anyway. We come to find out that the Army of 12 Monkeys wasn't responsible at all. It was a lab assistant in a virology lab, and he releases the virus. And this movie has a lot of things going on. I always thought of this more as a time travel movie, because one of the things you get here is a very different look at time travel, where time is permanent. You can't change time. You can't change the past, which really begs the question: if you're going back to try and change your future, do you have a chance to change that either? Since that is probably written as well, you just don't know it yet. So that's an interesting thing that I think we could talk about, which is time travel in this movie. But that's it's a brief synopsis of the movie. I very much encourage you to go see the movie yourself, because I don't want to ruin too much of it. There's a lot going on, and I really want to get into the nuts and bolts of some questions about this movie's relevance, but also the production value and the actor's performance as well. So I'm going to start with the actors. I'm going to kick it around and just throw out 3 actors that I think we need to cover, and then we'll go ahead and then any other performances after that. So first of all, I'm going to start with the big kahuna, the guy who dominates this film, in my opinion, which is the guy who plays a character named Jeffrey Goins, Brad Pitt. So I'm going to start with Bracey on that one. Give us your take on Brad Pitt's performance in this movie.
I've got to say that the 12 Monkeys really made me notice not just Brad Pitt, but Bruce Willis. Up until then, I just thought of both of them as both competent and entertaining actors. You know, they're nothing special, just like somebody who's really good at like putting out good movies. You know, I of course enjoyed Bruce Willis from Moonlighting, and I'd seen Brad Pitt in a few things, but you know, this is like when I saw Tom Cruise in Rain Man, something clicked, and I understood, like, okay, this guy is of a completely different caliber than I'd formerly been thinking of him as. Like, I realized that Brad Pitt is not just kind of a movie star kind of guy, but he is a legitimate and calculated and devoted actor. I was so incredibly impressed by his performance because I think doing crazy, if you want to be real about it, if you like in movies and acting, they talk about authenticity a lot when they're trying to achieve something. You know, when they're trying to go a little bit further than just entertainment. And he comes across as authentically mentally disturbed for me. The performances in this film are just so good, and like you, Nemesis, Brad Pitt just steals the scene anytime he's there. He just completely dominates the movie. So even though he doesn't have the largest role in the film, his presence is just there and it's just continuously felt. Anytime you even see like just a still image of him, because he makes such an impact on that introductory scene in the asylum.
Right.
It just is wonderful, and it kind of reminds me in a way of like the devotion of Heath Ledger when he was doing the Joker. This the tics that he gives himself, the wild gesticulations, the obsessive need to always use his middle finger to point things out. You know, just like all these things that he does. And I've never watched any like the behind the scenes or the or any of the extras and things on a DVD or a Blu-ray. But it makes me want to go back and learn a little bit about his process. Like, how did he get so deep into this character? Because it's incredibly insightful, and it just feels so real when you watch him. So this is why I stood up and recognized, like, this guy is a major talent in Hollywood. Like, this performance feels legit.
Absolutely. And we were kind of talking about that before we came on, and that the only 2 things I had seen him in before he starred in this movie were Interview with the Vampire and Legends of the Fall. And I was whelmed. I wasn't overwhelmed. I wasn't underwhelmed. I was whelmed by his performance as Louis in Interview with the Vampire. Legends of the Fall made me want to go out and jump off a cliff. So, I'm just going to say that right out there. But yeah, I mean, Brad Pitt exudes crazy in this movie. And I hope no one takes offense at this, but, citing Robert Downey Jr.'s character in Tropic Thunder, you never go full retard. Well, he didn't go full crazy in this movie. He went believable crazy. Yeah. And so you can see that even though he's insane, he has thought processes. They just broke it. And so you can see that even though he's insane, he has thought processes. They just broke it. you know, so which makes it even that much more disturbing. You literally, there are times when I watch him in this film and I'm legitimately disturbed, you know. So I'm going to kick it over to Adam next. Adam, thoughts on Brad Pitt?
Brad Pitt, his performance as Jeffrey is spot on. I wasn't sure if I was going to say this, but you know, for someone who's actually been hospitalized a few times, I've seen people like that in real life, and I was just like eerie, scary how spot on it was.
Yeah.
Because the only other thing I've seen him in up to this point was an episode of 21 Jump Street.
Okay.
Yeah, Brad Pitt was in an episode of season 2 of 21 Jump Street, and maybe Thelma and Louise.
Okay.
I think he had a small part in that, but I love him as Jeffrey, and the points that he's making when he's making them, they make perfect sense. The whole thing about consumerism, just made perfect sense. And I'm like, I know people who are legit crazy, and that's exactly how they would talk.
Yeah, exactly. And it's weird that you say that because I'm not sure what philosopher or whoever it was. It might have been an author that said it, but they said something to the effect of "There's wisdom in madness." Mm-hmm. You know, it really is the feeling you get from Jeffrey Goins. Steve.
Yeah.
Get us up.
Yeah, as far as Brad Pitt, I really think that this was the first movie where we really got to see the depths that he could go. Yeah, like you guys, I think the first thing I saw him was Legends of the Fall, or as I call it, Legends of the Flop. I hate that movie. I hate it so much. But Brad Pitt is good in this one, and I think it's because Terry Gilliam is a guy who knows how to make the most of his actors. When we talk about Bruce Willis, I'll get into some of the stuff that he did there. But with Pitt, you can definitely tell it's like he was not putting up with the typical Brad Pitt stuff. He didn't want like typical, action star things that you normally get with this particular actor. He wanted him to go farther, and I think he did. On top of that, the portrayal of insanity I thought was really, really good. And I normally don't say that because a lot of times in fiction, they act crazy just because they're crazy, or they're evil because they're crazy, or crazy because they're evil, or some variation of this. That's not the case here. He has definite reasons to be the way that he is. I think his relationship with his father particularly is damaged, very, very damaged, and you see how that relationship plays out. And it also is probably why he hates capitalism as much as he does, because his father is the big time virologist, who is involved with this company. And I think probably there's a lot of stuff that, Pitt sees or Goins sees, as a child of privilege. He's seeing all this stuff in the inside and he's saying this stuff needs to burn. Right. And the thing of it is like he has many, many good points. And I will say this opening scene where we first meet him, where he gives the grand tour of the sanitarium to Bruce Willis. I mean, it's just spot on, because this is where you start saying, okay, there's a lot of method in his madness, which is the way I think he should write madness. There should be a method behind it. And you can definitely see the wheels turning in Goins' brain at all times, even when he's, being manic and, gesticulating and constantly doing the middle finger thing and, all of the, gestures. You can tell that Pitt probably did his research. He's probably at least observed people, with similar conditions to know how to do this. Mm-hmm. And he's definitely thought about his character and how that works. And the fact that Brad Pitt is naturally charismatic and charming, especially at that age, he takes advantage of all this. So he comes across as a very charismatic villain, and it's wonderful. And what's worse is he's not even really the villain.
Yeah. I will also add that they make no effort in this movie to make Brad Pitt beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which is great. I mean, he's
scruffy. He looks, screwed up. I mean, he's dressed in these weird outfits, and he has the hair and all this. He definitely looks deranged. I mean, no question.
Even when he's in, a nice suit or a tux at the party, he looks crazy. He looks like there's something wrong. The other thing I will say is having seen this behavior up close, it just came off as so authentic. The sense of territory you often get in these places, where he kicked the guy out of his chair, or when he wants something, he throws him out. I mean, that is really authentic. And I would love to know, was that Gilliam? Was that ad-libbed on the part of Brad Pitt? Because it was just a great touch. Go ahead, Adam. You look like you had something to say.
No, in places like that, the whole thing with the chair,
Yep.
That's exactly how it is in real life.
Yep.
And that's what I loved about the part. It was just so authentic.
Yeah, and I can't think of anything much more authentic than that as far as insane asylum than going all the way back to Cuckoo's Nest. So
I was gonna bring that up actually.
Okay.
If Cuckoo Nest had a child, it would be this the Jeffrey character from this.
Definitely. Okay, so let's move right on to the I would say ostensibly the main character of this film, but like we said, Brad Pitt stole this movie, the scenes he's in. Not that Bruce Willis did a bad job, but Bruce Willis has a different role in this movie. I want to kick that over. Let's start with Steve on this one for Bruce Willis.
Yeah, I'll talk a little bit about Bruce Willis. I think he does a pretty good job in the role that he's in. Terry Gilliam originally did not want him. I think he wanted some other actor, but he had to take a A-list actor for the studio to roll ahead with it. That was part of the concessions that he made. But in the end, he picked somebody that he knew, somebody that he was familiar with, somebody that he could work with, and somebody who could get the performance that he wanted from him. And I think that definitely showed. And one of the things I really found that was interesting about the way Gilliam handled Willis here is that he basically said, Bruce, you're not going to do any of the things that you're known for. You're not going to do the steely-eyed gaze. You're not going to do any of the action things that you're used to doing from Die Hard. You're going to go and be truly vulnerable because you're not going to be able to rely on the things that have gotten you through these other performances. And I think that definitely shows. There is a level of vulnerability in Bruce Willis's performance here that is amazing. There's almost a childlike innocence at times because this character, James Cole, is somebody who never really, had a childhood, not a normal one. And so, here he is finally enjoying all the things that he couldn't enjoy as a child. And there's this sense of wonder, mixed in with this whole thing of I have to, deal with the end of the world, and do I believe what my senses are telling me? All of this, and all of it is just really great. I think that Bruce Willis, while not like putting in like an amazing performance, I think does what the story needs him to do. He's definitely kind of playing that role from La Jetée, the short film it's based on, pretty well. And the fact that he really does wrestle with reality as well as he does in his visual performance and the way that his mannerisms, the way he plays it. I think Gilliam got what he needed out of that, and I think it made him a good actor in this film. Not as good as Pitt, obviously, but good enough.
I will say that for my part, I think Bruce Willis is very good in this movie, and he's good in this type of role where he is a set upon man. And I think that you could see this. If I was Gilliam and I had seen the movie I'm about to bring up beforehand, I would have felt a lot better about the choice of having him in my movie. And that's a movie that came out a year before this, which is Pulp Fiction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Gilliam actually cites that as one of the things that he liked from Willis and that he used.
Right. So you see his character in Pulp Fiction, and you can see a lot of crossover in the performance between that character in Pulp Fiction and this character here in 12 Monkeys. So I think it showed that he had a different range from the smart mouth, wisecracking guy in Moonlighting, David Addison, to the, like you said, steely-eyed action hero that you got in Die Hard. Yeah, that this was something different, and I think that would lead up into other roles. I've seen him in things like The Siege. I think he was great in Tears of Heaven. He was in. There's been a lot of stuff like that, so he could play those parts well. Now, I think if you had asked him to pull off the acting performance that you were asking of someone like Brad Pitt, this movie I don't know that Bruce Willis has that range.
No, I don't think so
that
either.
stuff. Let's kick it over to Adam. Adam, what do you think about Bruce Willis' performance in this movie?
I think it's it's 4 on a scale of 5.
Okay.
I really was able to see that childlike wonder of things he never got to experience through his eyes, and asking myself, how far off are we in real life of, the whole thing with the sun and the ocean and the air.
Mm-hmm.
Sort of just the way he was like, the air is beautiful. All his interactions with the psychiatrist, I thought were really well done. And it's just, I enjoy it. Once again, this is another one of those movies that's not 8A. There was a lot of it, especially with Willis's performance, that was a little difficult for me.
Mm-hmm.
But I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, definitely. He's very good at what he does, but I would say he's not a character actor. He has some range, but I don't think he is the same level of character actor that someone like Pitt is. Even someone like, to a greater degree or to a lesser degree, Johnny Depp. He could do quite a lot of stuff, which really begs the question: what the heck was going on in the water at 21 Jump Street? Because there were a lot of great actors in that.
They almost got Depp on as Goins in this movie. They didn't quite get him, but they tried to get him.
Wow!
Like I said, 21 Jump Street, for what it had, a really good pool of talent.
Yeah.
The show it was, and I almost forgot that Bruce Willis was in Pulp Fiction.
Yeah. And then you think about that character, and you think about him tied up. We don't want to go into the visuals, but tied up in the chair and everything he goes through. Yeah. So, all right, Jeff, let's get to you. Bruce Willis. What are your thoughts on Bruce Willis in this movie?
I'm actually going to give him a higher grade than all the rest of y'all.
Okay.
I watched Terry Gilliam talking about this film one time, and he was talking about how impressed he was with Bruce Willis's performance, and I had to agree. And the thing that struck me, he thought so much of his performance. He said that I'm amazed that he didn't get nominated for an Oscar.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah,
Oh, wow.
really high praise from the guy. Especially considering this wasn't his first choice.
Do you think maybe, just a quick question for you, do you think maybe that's because the role, Jeffrey Goins is much more of an external role? He's putting it out there for you, while Bruce Willis is more of an internal role?
I think that's precisely what's going on here. I like the fact that what probably attracted both these guys to the project. Now, obviously, the studio wanted a big name, so they pulled Willis out, but he could have always said no. Brad Pitt was very definitely, I don't have any confirmation of this, but knowing how actors think, Brad Pitt was very definitely wanting to get away from just being thought of as the pretty boy, especially after things like Thelma and Louise, and now he just he played the very beautiful vampire Louis.
Yeah.
This was a chance for him to do something different. He didn't want to get typecast. Spend 10 years doing like romantic comedies like Matthew McConaughey ended up doing before he just said I'm just not going to do it, and I'm not going to do it to the point where I'll sacrifice 3 years of career until I can start getting something more interesting, despite how profitable it was for him. I think the same thing applies here for Bruce Willis, is that, I know I can do the funny. I know I can do the action. I'm very good at both of these. That's proven commodity. But this will give me a chance to stretch. And the fact that this is precisely what Terry wants, I can see him thinking this is a real opportunity to really show what I can do and to test myself and to push myself. And I think the word I was going to use before Steve brought it up is the thing that impresses me in this film is his vulnerability. Because
absolutely.
Yeah, he's loaded with the very first scene we see him in, he's in a cage. And even though his interaction with the guards, you hear oh, this guy's troubled, this guy's tough, all this. but he never really gives us that. It's not until very late in the film that we see him in action, and he's not like the superhero action guy. It's a believable level of action considering the type of life he's been living.
He's a survivor.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, he is very much a survivor, and that's pretty much what everybody you would think in the future is going to be, who's in the lower classes, and that's also an interesting thing because he's a career criminal by their societal standards, and I wonder why that is. There's a lot more of this story that I want to know about upon having watched it again, and I was thinking like, oh, I'd like a deeper dive into this and a deeper dive into that. I liked his survival strategies in the future. That even though he's apparently had enough compliance beat into him that even though he didn't volunteer, he kind of goes along with things. He knows how things are going to work. He's basically a prisoner from 25 years to life potentially. And as he struggles to deal with the disorientation of time travel and see the world that he vaguely remembers from being a child versus the reality of his presence, and like you guys said, the pure joy he experiences at like just breathing non-recycled air, at seeing the sun, the world, potentially they set up almost looking like a nuclear winter, even though that's not the apocalypse. In his opening scenes, his travels into the world above, not having all these horrible things happen, and just it's a really moving and really well done, understated performance for a guy who has been a larger than life character in his career up until this point. And I can't say enough good things about it. But
cool.
Brad Pitt, because of his externalizing, and that's his character, he stands out. So I don't know if like it would take a deeper analysis to say like if I like Pitt or Willis more, but the fact that here's the guy who's the A-list star, and Brad Pitt is coming into that, and he's willing to pull back and let this other guy step forward, basically accepting the role that maybe another more ego-driven actor would have wanted, because that's like the big splashy role. So hats off to both the guys in this film.
Okay, now real quick before we get to the next main star of this film, I just want to throw this around there because I'm curious what you guys are going to answer, because I don't know the answer to this. One of the crimes they cite for Bruce Willis's character is antisocial sex. What the hell is antisocial? Yeah. So I want to hear what you think it is, or if you have no idea.
Yeah, Devin laughed in this. I need some time to think.
Sure. So let's start with Jeff. What is antisocial sex? What has he been arrested for?
Okay, antisocial sex, just from the inference, just from the words, because we get no context, no details. And I noticed like one of the crimes he's accused of is what was it called? It was something like disrupting the permanent emergency crisis order, something like that.
Right.
And that's the thing that made me think of Today all the way. It's like, oh, we got like lockdowns forever. We got all these these safety protocols forever. That to me, that sounds like a guy who just had enough of the BS and just kind of wanted to live. The antisocial sex, the way it's framed, actually sounds like a rape offense. But if you look back to things like 1984 or even George Lucas's THX 1138. I think there we have examples of antisocial sex, of people who are not going by the societal, whatever kind of society they've got. If it's some sort of like regimented, regulated sex.
Excuse me, Jeff, would my Pornhub page be considered antisocial sex in those contexts?
Yeah, I'm thinking like maybe just trying to have consensual sex with somebody who wants some consensual sex might have been antisocial sex, but it's framed just by the dialogue as potentially rape, but we don't get a real insight into that.
See, he doesn't come off as a rapist to me, and
no.
And part of me almost feels like it might be masturbation for some reason. It's antisocial sex.
That sounds like a Terry Gilliam thing. Now that you mention it, yeah, he was Mighty Python.
Yeah,
well, there's a lot of subtlety in here. That one little line might have been like the most subtle of foreshadows just to get you to wonder, because there are a number of scenes where it's set up like Bruce Willis might be a rapist. He might be a killer. You know, we see this with Madeline, with Stowe's reaction to him in several scenes where he's dominant, he's in charge, and they set you up for that, and they even leave you hanging on it a while. But that just feels like a real red herring. So I don't think their crime is as violent as we would think in our time.
Terry Gilliam loves to mess with your head, and he definitely does it here. Steve, just real quick, antisocial sex.
I have no idea. I'll be honest. I personally think that whatever it is that he was accused of, it was not something that would be considered a crime in 1995. Let's just put it that way. I think a lot of it is he broke whatever social norms that they're putting in for social control, and he was basically somebody who just broke the rules. You know, he was not going along with, you know, what the scientists were doing in some respect, and they just basically threw this stuff together to throw him in jail. I don't think that he did anything, honestly. He doesn't seem like the type. The only time he's ever really violent is either defending himself, you know, doing something that's involved with his mission, because as he says, he regards everybody as dead in the past. Yeah. Or to defend Rayleigh. We very often see him beating people to death because they were threatening Rayleigh.
But I think that's very much survival instinct there. You know, it's like when he fights, it's there is no fights for honor or for status. He seems to come from a future where if you fight, you're fighting for survival. So
or the defense of somebody that you love, which by that point he was in love with her. So there's a little bit of that. And I'm just going to throw out this idea. I don't think that was the intention, but what if he meant sects as in SECTS? Like he was part of a group that he shouldn't have been part of, and that was considered antisocial. I mean, that probably wasn't. I think it was probably sex, but I'm just thinking as an interesting idea, because it could be meaning anything with that.
It's possible.
If that had been the case,
I guess I'm going to have to go to Google later.
That would be like 4D chess on just a genius level and beyond.
Yeah, it could be anything. Yeah. So I kind of like the thought that it was left there and you're left to interpret what the word means. So you can kind of think about, you know, what they're really doing here. Because Terry Gilliam is the master of the mind F.
All right, if there's a future where masturbation is a crime, I'm doomed. I'm so... You will never hear from Black Adam ever again if there's a future where masturbation is a crime. I am doomed.
So you're saying you're going to sit back to 1906?
I could see Terry Gilliam doing that, though. That's
come on,
funny
Adam.
thing.
It's Demolition Man. It's right around the corner.
Well, you know, every sperm is sacred. So
I was thinking that too.
That's like that episode of Family Guy.
No, that was from The Meaning of Life, Monty Python movie. There's actually a song. If you haven't seen it, you got to go find out it. You go find it.
Every sperm is sacred. Every sperm is good. Yeah.
Eric Idle sings a song.
You know what? Yeah, I haven't seen that in years. You know what? This is once when I honestly don't know. I really think it's what everyone else is saying. Maybe he was, you know, I'm sick of all the social norms, all the rules, and all the regulations, and they just, can we get them on? What can we get them on?
Yeah.
Okay, antisocial sex. Let's make this a thing, whatever it is. And boom.
I
it's a made-up crime.
The question is, we're going to parallel this to like what we're going through now.
Yeah.
You know, how much longer are we as a society going to put up with what's going on right now ourselves?
I think that is
we're the underground.
Keep your eyes on Australia.
Yeah. It is. We will definitely get into that. I had a couple questions on that, but yeah, I think that's a great point. And I said it was Eric Idle. It wasn't. I apologize. It's Michael Palin that sang that song. And so
God gets quite irate.
And Terry Jones is the mother, just popping out like 5 billion Irish babies. So as he so often does, he was the mother of Brian.
They were making fun of Catholics basically and Catholic doctrine.
And I thought it was hilarious, you know. And I'm a Catholic, but you know, that's a whole other thing. All right, last but certainly not least, let's get into Madeline Stowe, and I'm going to go ahead and kick this one off. Madeline Stowe is, I am going to say, it is easy to overlook her brilliance because she plays so often female characters that have a very strong side to them, and yet they evolve, and that evolution comes with a vulnerability that she is so great at putting out there. And the first time I ever saw this in her was in Last of the Mohicans, when she played that character just to perfection. She also did it in the Two Jakes, when she was younger. And then another movie that's not real well known that I liked, she was in The General's Daughter. I think she plays a special investigative service, and she's investigating a murder at West Point, and that was a great movie. I liked it because it had the West Point tied to it too. But I have to say that her performance in this movie really ties it together because she is the stand-in for the audience, where at first we're like, what is going on here? And then we're with her on this journey, and then suddenly her whole vision of reality and what is real or not is shattered, and I think she has a line that I agree with so much, which is that psychiatry is the new religion of our society. They decide who is right and wrong, who's insane or not, what is real, what is not real. And so when you go against the orthodoxy, you look at how society reacts, and it's not well. It's often violent, actually. And I think that's one of the geniuses of this movie, is that this movie really makes you question. It's like, okay, if someone came back with news for us, how would we react now? I don't think it would be much different. We would throw them in an insane asylum. We'd lock them up,
You guys would. I would listen to what they have to say.
Right. But I'm just saying the general society. But even if you did, you would be sitting there going, I mean, and you see that even now with what we're going through in the pandemic. There's so much information out there. And so anybody who puts information out there that's against the general orthodoxy is denounced as a conspiracy theory and theorist and a nut. And maybe they are. I don't know. But that is the automatic go-to position, now, is that shut up, get in line, and do what everybody tells you to do, And it's kind of concerning because you're like, science fiction predicted this, and maybe those science fiction writers aren't so crazy after all. So, all right, I am going to start with, I have started with Steve and Jeff, so I'm going to start with Adam first. What were your thoughts on Madeline Stowe's character?
I was like, where can I get a psychiatrist like this?
Yeah.
I have asked myself that more than once.
No, just the way she handled it as a patient is is she good, easy on the eyes? Christopher. I like the performance, and that one line that really still stands out for me was that, that psychiatry is the religion. And I was like, wow. That whole little speech blows my mind.
Mm-hmm.
I also like how when she realized that that James Cole was telling the truth when she saw the bullet. How would you react once you had everything you believed your entire life just shattered like that?
And then she saw the picture of him from World War I, which was just like,
yeah,
so blew her mind.
So my other thing was she meant to be the Cassandra character she was talking about in her book?
They asked that very question in the movie.
I think that there is a moment. Were you able to see this with video description?
No, unfortunately, I was not.
Okay, there's a moment right at the end of the movie. You know how Cole keeps having that dream about seeing a guy getting shot and everything, and it turns out he's seeing his own death, which is all sorts of messed up. There's a moment where she's being arrested, and she looks into the child Cole's eyes, and then she looks around at everybody, and I think that is where she becomes Cassandra, because she's looking at everybody, and she knows exactly what is going to happen to all these people in 2 weeks. And she knows exactly what's going to happen to Cole 30 years in his future because it just happened to him 2 minutes ago and he's dead. So she knows all of it and can do nothing about it, and that's when she becomes the Cassandra character. That's my opinion, anyways.
All right, I guess that would make sense.
Yeah. Let's kick it over to Steve Shadeway. What are your thoughts on Madeline Stowe in this movie?
I really like her as an actress, and I have to say I kind of respect that. After this, she got out of Hollywood. I have to say, anybody that can walk away from Hollywood and all the glitz and all the glamour deserves a certain level of respect. But in this particular role, I really agree with you. I think that she does definitely, have that realness to her. But I think the other thing that I really like about her performance here is that she's a really strong character, likes playing really strong characters, but she's also a very feminine character. It's never to the point where she is less of a female character because she is showing strong moments. When she stands up to the other scientists, oh yeah, you're being defensive. Well, yeah, of course she's being defensive because you attacked her, all this sorts of thing. But she does so in a believable way, and she is never, less of that before that. And I really like her. I think she is definitely an attractive actress, but she never plays that up. She's not overly dolled up. She looks like what you would expect a scientist of that kind to be. And I really liked her character all in all. Not just because she represents, the closest thing we have to a normal character, normal being relative in this damn movie, but also because she represents the rational side of things. She's a little bit of the Scully to Bruce Willis's Mulder, as it were. So she is playing that skeptic role, and she's asking all the questions. How do you know this is not all in your head? Well, we found that out because there's a bullet from World War II in Bruce Willis's leg. So all of these sorts of things. And we see her have an arc. We see that she starts off believing in the orthodoxy, and then gradually her defenses crumble, and she starts agreeing with Cole because she sees all the evidence, because these things that she's seen do not make sense to her, and she has to reconcile it somehow. But also they kind of ask the question whether or not, and they never outright say this, but they kind of raise the specter of this, where she may very well have a Stockholm syndrome level of relationship with Bruce. Right. So is the relationship with Cole because she genuinely loves him, or is it because she is identified with her captor in a Stockholm kind of relationship? And there could be some truth to both, and we never know. So in a way, she's not entirely sane either. So there's always an element of madness to all these main characters that they're all struggling with. And ultimately, she gets drawn in Cole's web, either because of fate or because, this is something that she believes in and she has to see it through. But I really liked her character. I thought that she contrasted very, very well with Bruce Willis's character. I thought the romance was believable too. And that was central to this movie.
I think your comparison to Scully is right on. And I think that part of that might be Stockholm Syndrome, their romance, but part of it might be the fact that they are sharing a truth, a forbidden truth that nobody else knows, and that draws them closer together.
And they have nobody to rely on but each other, yeah.
Yeah, in the same way that Scully and Mulder, really, they didn't seem to be very compatible, their personalities, but their experiences and the truths they had learned together that, brought them closer together. So I think that's a great point. Jeff, what did you think about Madeline Stowe?
You actually hit on the point that I was going to cover, that their relationship feels real. It doesn't feel rushed like that can happen in, most movies when you've only got 90 minutes to establish a relationship, and that's not the central focus of the film. Their relationship feels real because as she comes around to Bruce's way of thinking, it's a world-shattering event, and this is the only person who can empathize with her. So her relationship with him becomes one of desperation. He is a life preserver, and she's on the Titanic, and he's the only thing she can cling to, even though she knows it's doomed in the end. I like this character a lot because she really covers all the facets. Now, as you've said, Nemesis, she is our POV character. She's our audience insert. This is how we look at the world through her eyes. So we get this broad spectrum of what it means to be a person dealing with other people. As a doctor, she is both compassionate and empathetic, which you want in a psychiatrist, but she's also dismissive because she has the education. She knows how things are supposed to be. She has that slight amount of intellectual superiority, not as much as, say, Frank Gorshin later shows in the film, but she's there, and that becomes another interesting part of the film. One of my favorite scenes with her is where her, her psychiatric superior, if you will, is castigating her a bit, and he's going like, "Oh, you're being defensive," and she's like, "I'm being defensive because you're attacking me." And here's two very intellectual people, two very well-educated people, and they both are playing the same game. And like, you can't act like that towards me because I know you're playing these little mind tricks. So it's a great scene, like watching people who are on the same playing field kind of spar. And Gorshin's character knows precisely what he's doing, but he's still doing it, even knowing that she's going to know what he's doing and she can fire back. But, he's got the position, he's got the seniority, so, who's the board going to side with, that sort of thing.
Well, he is the Riddler.
Yeah. So
Okay.
he does like a cool little thing when he's like looking up at the vent, the impossible escape with Bruce Willis, and he just does this thing where he kind of looks up and goes like, just kind of rattles his teeth together. A very insane sort of like ticky kind of movement, which again made me think of the Riddler.
And it's the kind of insanity that a lot of psychiatrists develop over time too.
Actually, the greatest joke in psychiatry is I always want to know how messed up the psychiatrists actually are.
My mother worked in mental health as a part of her nursing career for a number of years, and you can't help but she was talking about working with psychiatrists and studying under psychiatrists, and she said and when we're discussing potential career paths, and I eventually, when I joined the service, would end up getting into mental health myself. But she had warned me not to take that on as a career, because when you listen to people's problems all day, it makes you crazy. She, as an example, she said one of the psychiatrists she knew said his favorite kind of person to date was a schizophrenic.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that's
I knew it. I always knew it.
Far out there, my understanding is 95% of shrinks are also seeing shrinks. So what does that tell you?
Yep.
So there's that going on. But the greatest moment for me, as far as her character, is she goes through all these things, and we see her 6 years later after the initial visit, and she's talking about all the things that Bruce Willis had talked to her about, and she has just kind of set all that aside. She doesn't even recognize that she's talking about all these people who talking about these future apocalyptic events, and it should resonate with her, but it doesn't. She's turned it into a platform, as a stepping stone in her own career. And when the paradigm shifts and we watch her come around and start to realize that all of this is true, everything she knows is wrong. And like the rest of you guys, I like the idea that the psychiatry is the new religion, and it goes deeper than that, because that's another thing that makes this movie relevant, and I'm sure we'll get into that in a segment on this later, is there's a great many. Our country was founded very religiously. Our laws are based on religious ethics and things, and religious morality, and over the centuries we think we've evolved into a secular society. But that's not true. The secular society, and this is a statement on that in this film, is we will always replace what we think are the old religions with, empirical scientific evidence. But then again, it also becomes a religion. Her and her colleagues' unwillingness to honestly listen to what Bruce Willis had to say, it has become their dogma. And now she is starting to realize that. And a lot of people these days, they don't realize they have adopted their own religions. They don't recognize as religions, but they have adopted their own dogma. And dogma is unflinching and inflexible. It allows for
Right.
nothing but the dogma. And when she comes to realize it, she realized she has nowhere to go but to Bruce Willis.
Yeah, that's a great point. And she even says at one point, "I'm losing faith,"
Yes.
which is exactly right. Um, for the purposes of time, I just want to throw out there real quick a couple. There are a lot of great supporting actors and actresses in this movie. A couple I just want to mention real quick before, because I want us to get into Terry Gilliam and then talk about the relevance of this movie. And I'm sure we're going to spend some time on that. But I wanted to throw out one is Frank Gorshin that Jeff already brought out. He was, of course, for all of you comic book fans out there, was the Riddler of Batman 66, and he's in this movie. Very wonderful. Also, big time actor, Christopher Plummer is in this movie in a small part, and he's in here. So, there are some really, really good supporting actors and actresses in this movie. Also, the guy who plays the lab assistant, you will recognize him from a number of different films. The one that ends up actually releasing the virus, and he does a great job as well. Even though he's in a small part, he pops up early in the movie, and on first glance, it's easy to overlook him, which I think is the whole point, because you overlook him, and he is the real threat in the movie, which is when you watch it on a second viewing is a little bit creepy. It gives you the shivers a little bit. So look for that if you're watching this film. All right, let's get into the big kahuna that has his prints all over this film, and that's Terry Gilliam, who directed this movie. And let's just tie all of this, direction, production, the look of the film, how it's shot, everything into Terry Gilliam and that thought. And I'm going to kick this off first is that I think one of the things that makes this film so wonderful and keeps you guessing for at least part of the movie on whether or not there's a twist here where Bruce Willis really is insane is because Terry Gilliam puts his own stamp of madness in the form of his visuals on the future. The way the doctors look, the way the technology works. They have him chained to the bed at one point. They're pulling up a blankie with like bunnies and stuff on it. Everything about it just screams insanity. But at the same time, you can kind of believe it from a post-apocalyptic future. And Terry Gilliam does this in Brazil. Same thing. You're like, you almost feel like you're going insane from looking at what's going on, So I think that is just absolutely brilliant from him. He brought this to Monty Python as well. This man's brain works in a different way, and I think we're all better for it. I think we're also all a little bit more disturbed for it as well. So with that in mind, let's go around the horn real quick and talk about Terry Gilliam and what he brought to this film and how the film benefit or if you thought it did benefit from it for his direction of the movie. And I'm going to start with Jeff on this one, and then I'm going to hit Adam, and I'll finish up with Steve. So, Jeff.
Coming from animation, the brilliance of Terry Gilliam is obviously going to be in his visuals. He was the animator on Monty Python, and he came up with some really crazy cartoony things going on there. So, and he got that with the British aesthetic for sardonic and dry-witted humor. Now, one of the things that really impressed me about Terry Gilliam, I was familiar with his films, like the Monty Python films he directed, and of course Brazil. So seeing that technological aesthetic that was applied to Brazil here in the future scenes made perfect sense for me. This almost feels like this could have happened in an offshoot of the Brazil world. It had the same sort of authoritarian dystopia to it in the future. So it feels like a second cousin. But what fascinated me about that also was like when we go back to the 1990s, Terry becomes very conservative in his camera work and his visuals. He states the 90s as the 90s, and he does it in the most excellent way, with the only break being where they're in the insane asylum, and especially when Brad Pitt's leading him around, the camera becomes very freeform, very distorted. It adds that whole disorienting experience of being in a madhouse and being on all sorts of drugs. So thematically, he's just brilliant like that. But one of the things I loved about the future aspect, where Terry really gets to be his most Terry-ness, is it's not just the technology, but it's the kind of the ideas about it. Like all these people aren't going to be touched. And when Bruce Willis is going out into the world, and I notice this not just with this, but later on with the time machine, there's some pseudo-sexual imagery in there. He's covered in this plastic placenta. He goes down this tunnel by himself, and he even he lays on this kind of not a stretcher, but like a wheeled kind of gurney bed, and he's shunted out first, and then we see him emerge through a small hole into the world. And it's like he has been born from the new world back out into the old world. And it starts off kind of dark, and then it lightens. And I'm thinking of all these things. I imagine Terry's thinking it was like a child's vision is very poor when they're first born, and you gain visual acuity as you grow. And then later on, when we get into the actual time travel scenario, it's that, but even more, where he's literally in this bizarre biomechanical womb that shunts him back into the past, like he's get this 2001 sort of I'm racing through the birth canal sort of thing once again. And he is as any good newborn is, he's naked when he arrives in our time. And when we first see him in the jail cell, he's covered in sweat and blood, and he's drooling. It's so an idea of like an infant that I was just like, man, Terry is just really firing on all cylinders here. He's throwing so much at you. You've really got to watch this movie several times to just take in everything that he's doing. Absolute genius.
Yeah. Even the costumes that he has for the scientists are this insanity. I mean, to me, those scientists looked like they belonged in the Rocky Horror Picture Show. They looked like, Transylvanians, so
it's so funny. You watch the film and you're like, aside from maybe just Christopher Plummer, everybody in the film is tinged with insanity. The future is just rife with it. The scientists come across, they're so weird, the way they act to him. There's no reason to put him on a chair that ratchets 12 feet in the air, if you just wanted to bind him to a chair. And the stupid bunny blanket and singing the songs to him, and you're like, you guys aren't singers. And then Stowe becomes tinged with madness. She's questioning her sanity at the end. Everybody you see in this film is potentially corrupted by madness and somehow. Like, even Maroney, the police detective, what's the actor? Mike Maroney. Or Christopher Maroney. He's he's dealing with scumbags and weirdos all day, and he just refuses to see things. So there's denial. There's all these wonderful aspects of madness just tinged everywhere. And when you look at Terry Gilliam's future technology, it's insane to look upon. It doesn't look functional in any way that we can understand. So madness doesn't care what works. Madness just happens. It's going to work because that's what my brain is saying.
Well, to quote Jeffrey Goins, madness seeps out from here out into the world. It's infectious.
Yes.
So Adam, what did you think about what Terry Gilliam brought to this movie? What stands out for you? Did you like what he did with the movie?
What stands to me is more, once again, dear Hollywood, start putting your classic movies in audio descriptive for people who are blind and visually impaired. I'm sure everyone in the Cinema Crusaders audience is sick of me saying this.
But it's worth saying. I think this is really important. I think we need to bring.
I would have appreciated a lot more of, say, the technology side of things, especially the future tech. If there was a second audio track telling me what was there.
For example, I hear, now that you say this, I got to ask you this question. When they ratcheted Bruce Willis up in the air, there is this, almost eyeball-looking thing on a long arm that is going back and forth like an eyeball on a stalk, looking at him with all of these videos on it of the scientists peering at him and stuff, and it's just grotesque and odd. And were you able to get any of that? Because that was
unfortunately, so I'm going to talk more on a story aspect.
Okay.
And a directing aspect from this point. It made me, this is the first time I've seen this movie. I've seen dribs and drabs in the last year and a half thanks to True Stream Media, which is a conspiracy theory channel. And it's one of the more saner ones out there. They're not as over the top as, say, Alex Jones or ODD TV.
No gay
You
frogs.
Yeah, there's no gay frogs and all that type of bullshit. And I fell in love with this movie to the point where I was like, wow, the story that it told, and I'm sure we'll talk about this in a few minutes. Really made me think, and it made me think to the point of, some of this is becoming real. Some of this has the potential to be real.
Yeah.
This is a damn good movie. The performances he was able to get out of his actors.
I think
the story that was told. Even the movie's now 26 years, it felt very fresh.
Mm.
I think what I will say, I made the joke there about gay frogs, but you were talking about conspiracy theories in this film and what comes real, and kind of the general theme of this is nobody believes you until they believe you. Well, if you ever get the chance, read up more about the whole gay frog thing, because there are some kernels of truth in there about what was really going on, that will make you go, okay. Alex Jones may be a little bit,
he's hyperbolic.
Yeah, Alex Jones is off the wall a lot of times. But people take the stuff he says and then don't look at the stuff that he throws out there that turns out to have, that's worth looking at sometimes, And I think that kind of fits into the theme of this movie. And I remember the first time I heard about the gay frogs, I was like, what in the hell is this man talking about? And I went and looked and read what he was talking about. And it was interesting because, no, the frogs aren't being turned gay. They aren't. There aren't gay frogs out there. But what he was talking about, it was worth reading about, just to kind of have it in the back of your mind and make you go, So I'll just put that out there. So
yeah, that's how I was trying to get at. I think the whole thing about psychiatry being the religion, or necessarily about the Jeffrey character the most, and what Gilliam was able to get out of it was maybe sometimes listening to the craziest person in the room may actually not be a bad idea,
or at least giving it the time of day, entertaining the idea.
Yeah.
So
I think the moral of this movie is there's more ways to look at the world than your own.
Yeah. I will say this as a former scientist, of sorts. I was a computer scientist, but I worked as an engineer and stuff. The thing that bugs me the most is when I hear the term settled science,
Yeah. Ask Galileo about that.
Yeah. Settled. There is no such thing as settled science, period. There really isn't. Even gravity, our idea of what gravity is and how it works has changed so much in just my lifetime. It's not even funny. So
I would recommend everybody out there if you've never read the book Timeline by Michael Crichton, at the very least pick it up and read the prologue where he talks about settled science and how science goes through these periods where they figure like, okay, we've discovered everything. We're just going to move on into elevating the technology we have. And you'll understand the hubris of that statement.
Yeah, the Victorians had the same attitude, and it didn't work out well for them.
And without getting derailed too much, I do think that we are dealing with that a lot recently in the recent past. Albert Einstein dealt with this. Albert Einstein was dismissed as a kook because he went against settled science, the establishment, and he was kept out of academia for a long time, and now his thoughts have become settled science. So we do this all the time. We don't learn from our mistakes, and I'm sure that's something we could talk about in just a little bit. But first, I want to get to Steve to talk about Terry Gilliam. So
yeah, I'll talk a little bit leading up to this because I think we want to talk a little bit about the influences and then who wrote the script. This movie is actually a remake, and although I generally go after remakes with venom. This is actually a good remake because it improves on the original movie on which it's based. It adds something new to the formula, and it overall makes it into something much better than what was there originally. The original 12 Monkeys was originally a French short film called La Jetée. I think I'm pronouncing that right, or The Jetty. And basically the things that are in common are like the time travel elements, the romance and whatnot. what Gilliam and the screenwriters add is the element of madness, all of the themes, the whole idea about settled science, and all of these other things, and just a lot of the lunacy that Gilliam brings into this, and it just raises the movie like so much more. And I will tell you, these screenwriters are David and Janet Peoples, and if you want to get an idea of the stuff that they have written, it is epic stuff. They co-wrote Blade Runner, Lady Hawk with Tom Mankiewicz. Yeah, Unforgiven, which we previously covered on Cinema Crusaders, and things like this. So these are people that have told really amazing stories that have made for some classic movies. These are not people that just got off the boat and just arrived into Hollywood. These are people that know the genre very, very well, and it shows. And this may actually be one of their most complex screenplays. And it's perfect for Gilliam. Gilliam actually looked at the screenplay and he was really impressed with it, which is one of the reasons he agreed to do it. Because normally Gilliam writes in the things that he directs as well. He normally does both those of the time. He made an exception for this movie because he loved the screenplay. And given the credentials of these people, you can understand why, in addition to how complex it is. In terms of what Gilliam brought to it, I think he brought his own aesthetic to it, because he claims he had not seen the short film. I actually can see where there's some things in common, but I'm kind of wondering whether that's because the Peoples brought it into the script and he just put his own version of it. I could see that being possible, but we don't really know. But in either case, he definitely brought the idea of madness into it. He raises the themes and the questions that I think are really interesting. And I think the real thing that he raises basically is, are people insane or is society insane? And it's basically trying to protect itself by calling everybody else nuts. And I think that there's a lot of elements to that. And you can definitely see, definite character arcs that the Peoples brought in and that, Gilliam built upon. The scientists look completely crazy, and you can tell that there's a definite Pythonesque influence on the future and some of the things that they brought in. A little bit of French cinema as well, but I'm kind of wondering if he cribbed things from the City of Lost Children or things of that nature. Because it definitely has a little bit of the French aesthetic, but that's because Gilliam also is very, very well steeped in European film, having spent a lot of time in England and having spent a lot of time with the Pythons. So there's a lot of that, and there's a little bit of the humor in there that's definitely Gilliam-esque, and all the way that he brought these performances out of these actors, especially people like Pitt, who really up to that point was just a pretty boy, and here you get this epic level performance out of him, that starts to catapult his career. All of these things, and I think that he made this movie so much better than it could have been with just anybody else directing this. This is definitely a Gilliam movie, even if it has the marks of other people on it. He took what was there, some really great ideas, but they were not focused. And then between the screenplay, which added something, and then Gilliam's own vision for what the film should look like and what the film should be, he raised it to an epic level science fiction movie. And that is the mark of a great director, that he can take all of these things and make something even better and do a remake that actually is worthy of the film and actually makes you want to watch his version instead of what came before.
Outstanding. Okay, so now we have hit on the part where we have all been, kind of sort of avoiding what we were going to get to, which is this movie's relevance to now. And I think I can say without a shadow of a doubt that the movie is extremely relevant for now for a couple of reasons, So I don't think that's even a question. We're going through a pandemic. We're experiencing varying levels depending on what country you're living in of authoritarianism. You might even think it's authoritarian overreach depending on your personal point of view. And I think we see a lot of that in this movie, and so I think the movie is relevant. So the question I'm gonna throw out a couple of questions out there, and I'm curious to hear your guys' answers, and I just want to hear from you guys. So first of all, this movie, movies like Outbreak, Andromeda Strain, these movies are all about pandemics. Even the most recent Planet of the Apes was caused by a pandemic. Is real life influencing science fiction and causing these stories to be written? Or is science fiction leaking into real life, and people are, I'm not going to say overreacting because I don't think that's fair. People are putting fiction on top of reality to drive the threat level or how they perceive what's going on in the world to a different level. Does that make sense? Okay, so with that question, I'm curious to hear what you guys have to say. I'm going to start with Adam.
I think that we're in a point in history where it feels very blended. To a point where I wake up in the morning and every comic book, every science fiction movie I've seen or watched or read seems to be part of reality right now. And the whole thing with, and this is where I think this movie is very relevant and how it is right now, anytime you come up, you want to ask a question about the current pandemic that doesn't fit into the social norm, you're instantly labeled a conspiracy theorist or insane, or you don't know what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of scares me. And, it just, I keep on asking the question in my head as I was watching this movie. How far away from it, or far away are we from?
Makes you wonder when you're going to get...
Air is so beautiful.
Makes you wonder when you're going to get arrested for antisocial sex. So
no, if that happens, I will jump off the JWB because it's not going to shoot me.
Okay.
At that point, it's just like, nah, this isn't the world I want anymore.
But I'll be honest with you. Okay. I'm just going to throw out a hypothetical here.
Okay.
There's a large island nation in the southern hemisphere right now where you're not allowed to leave your home. So if you left your home to visit, say, your girlfriend and had sex, do you think it's out of the realm of possibility you could find the police, roll up to your door, and arrest you for antisocial sex?
Yes.
Over there, yeah.
So I guess we're there now.
Yeah. Just asking questions. FBI, don't come get me.
Yeah.
So yeah, it is. Yeah, I think your point is well taken. Steve, same question. What are you thinking?
It's definitely a chicken or the egg thing, and I think in fact this movie seems to address the very question because who causes the events in the movie? Is it Bruce Willis going back in time doing what he does? Is it the scientists doing what they do? Is it Jeffrey Goins? Is it the apocalypse scientist? The lab assistant? Is it all of it together? At what is it Bruce giving the idea to Goins? Is it at what point do you say this is what influences that? And I think when you're talking about like real world influence, it's the same thing. I will say that one aspect that I think we need to at least think about is the fact that the reason that they used the virus, I think in part it's because they didn't have the Cold War anymore. Because before that, if you wanted a post-apocalyptic movie, it was nuclear war. By that point, nobody took nuclear war as a serious possibility because of the fall of the Soviet Union. And La Jetée, I believe, actually did use the nuclear war thing. So obviously they couldn't do that. So it may very well be that it's like, okay, this stuff's in the news. Let's make it a virus, because they needed a reason for this to happen that didn't seem dated. And I think that there was a little bit of that went in there. But is it possible also, that the popular culture influences things to happen? Maybe it's entirely possible. I mean, there's certainly the things that we're exposed to influence us in ways that we're not always conscious of. That's certainly a possibility. So yeah, I think there is a certain level of chicken and the egg. I think they feed into each other. I'll kind of go along with the Hulk's tagline: "Is he a man? Is he a monster? Or is he both?" And kind of both is what I'm kind of leaning towards.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. Each generation does have its bugbear. Nuclear Armageddon and the Cold War, kind of fell out of favor, especially in the 90s, with the fall of the Soviet Union. So I could definitely see that. Jeff, what about you? What do you think?
It's art imitates life, but life life is sometimes influenced by art. So I think it goes more one way, but it does cycle back around the other way as well. For instance, early on, you mentioned like, it's crazy. This movie came out and then there was Outbreak at the same time, but then you look a decade or so down the road and you've got Deep Impact releasing at the same time as Armageddon. Because
True.
these
Very true.
things, yeah, these are things that are in the zeitgeist. When we worried about war, the apocalypse was started about war. In the 1950s, we were concerned about radiation. So, radiation created Superman and giant ants and Godzilla and all sorts of things. Then, a few decades later, all of our mishaps are due to genetic malfunctions or genetic tampering. Uh, Later on, we get things like transhumanism, and we start seeing movies like Transcendence with Johnny Depp, and what was that one with Scarlett Johansson, where like she basically uh, got quantumly evolved. These sorts of things happen. So whatever the next new thing will be, I like that. Whatever the next new thing will be
Ad,
the next
real
thing.
quick, Adam Banner came up and said the sexy word of the day is zeitgeist. So,
But was it anti-socially
Yeah,
sexy?
okay.
Yeah.
And what's a Scarlett Johansson?
Yeah, I think it was Luna. No, they named the movie after the first primate woman that they discovered, a famous skeleton. They named her character Lucy. Lucy. That was the one.
Lucy.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so that like transhumanism and whatever the next thing is. So like when these ideas are in the zeitgeist, uh, the people who are smart in our entertainment look for this. They follow the trends. They go like, okay, this is a good thing to tap into. People are thinking about it. People are talking about it. It's trending wherever on social media, that sort of thing. So that's where we get that. But at the same time, people are looking at like Star Trek: The Next Generation, where they're running around with basically like iPads, and Steve Jobs is like, it'd be pretty cool to have like a super thin little computer in your hand. I think I'll work on that. So it does bounce around both ways. So yeah, that sort of thing happens. So that's out there, and I'm hoping in our last segment, I don't know how long we're going to go. Steve actually brought up a lot of stuff I want to talk about because I really want to get into the time travel aspect because I got some big thoughts on how that works.
That will be the next segment. So let me ask you a question real quick, and I'm going to kick it right back to you.
All right.
So we have seen time travel in science fiction forever. We've seen it in science fiction books. We've seen it in science fiction movies, TV shows. This one, I think, gives us a little bit different look at science fiction. First of all, it goes with that concept of science fiction where time is immutable. You can't change it. You can only hope to contain it, just like Michael Jordan. So and then they do this weird thing where somehow or another, Madeline Stowe, who should have no way of connecting with Cole, does. Somehow the future seeped into her past so that she had some unconscious memory of it. And I think this is such an interesting concept. And I don't know that I had ever seen anything. That's why I've always looked at this movie more as a time travel movie. Especially since the movie that preceded this, the short film, was time travel. So what are your thoughts on, let's get into that time travel and its relevance, to now, to how we look at time now, how we're starting to evaluate that. So what do you think?
Okay, for the most part, I think this is perhaps the purest, and for a theoretical idea, the most factual depiction of time travel possible. My view on these sorts of things in science, my own headcanon, if you will, is that the past is the past, and the past has occurred. So it's written. I've always liked the idea that if you go back and you try and change the past, well, the past doesn't like that. So the past works to make the future happen. So, and I've discussed this before in Sloppy Spoilers. What they seem to be caught in is what's called a causality loop. By going back into the past, they create the future that they're from. And that's inescapable. And you see this peppered throughout there. Like you find out that Bruce Willis influences Jeffrey Goins. Like, the monkeys, the society, all this is great. But Bruce Willis's case is so fascinating to Madeline Stowe that he influences her future writings, and she starts looking into all these other doomsayers who are predicting, mass extinction events in the future, and the whole theory she comes up with, like, nobody's going to believe you because you claim to be from the future and have this information. But that impacts the man who actually releases the virus, and the most subtle foreshadow of the film, really brilliantly done. And it's upon subsequent viewings, like you said, Nemesis, you watch that and you get chills because you're like, oh no. Even though you watch the scene and you feel like your subconscious gets it, because that guy's in the scene too long for him just to be like a little throwaway line or something. He's important. And so when he pops back up, you get it. And that's when you really start to feel the dread. Now I know how it's going to play out, and the characters no longer do as they're struggling to get there. So not only has Bruce Willis influenced the future that he's from, but the people he's affected have influenced that future. And so it's like the ripples in the pond, it's just breaking off and making all these other connections. So this brings up two interesting points for me. If Bruce Willis's future hadn't happened yet, if somebody in this timeline was aware, could they affect this future outcome? If somehow they had some sort of epiphany, this is a possible outcome. Because by Bruce Willis coming back into the past, he makes that the past, which is now immutable. And, as he keeps going on with, they'll say it like Terminator, like, all you people are dead. I consider all you dead. It's already happened. I can't save you. Even though he thinks, he carried a gun in there to confront Goins at the party. He's like, I just want the sample of the virus. Where you're thinking, if this guy's responsible, why don't you just shoot him? But he doesn't, because he loses his gun. But he doesn't even try. It's never even occurred to him to try. So everything in their future tells them the past is immutable. They're trying to do something towards their future. But the most interesting thing, even that question, is if somebody came from a future beyond Bruce Willis's, they're like, okay, your future's just set because this happens, and the whole fact that they're caught in this loop. The fact that she remembers, I have to wonder, this connection, is it because he has encountered her so many times that now they've entered a state of quantum entanglement? Because like you said, there is no possible way she can have a connection by looking at him when she saw him in her future. There's no way she could have this. So they don't understand the science of what's going on, as we see, people get bebopped around all kinds of centuries, being in the wrong place. So I have to wonder if there's some level of quantum entanglement going on that allowed that impossible connection.
Yeah, it really is pretty insane. And when you try and wrap your mind around it, you could get so far down the rabbit hole that you will go crazy, because you're like, okay, if he goes back there, did he create the past, or was he always supposed to go back there because that was the past? So no matter what he did, he was destined to go back there because his future was the past. It's like at some point you're just like, you're banging your head against the wall. So, let's go to Steve, and then I'll wrap up with Adam on this question. What do you think, Steve?
Okay. Yeah, I agree. This is definitely a movie that's about a stable time loop. And there are some interesting things. I want to throw out an interesting theory, and you can comment on it or not. What if what is going on here is that the scientists from the future are trying to ensure their own existence? They want to get this thing that they want from the past, but they are setting things in motion to deliberately make sure that they happen, that they are in power. What would they be most afraid of? Losing that power by somebody changing history.
And I'm looked at as the one that writes dark stories, folks.
Yes. And the thing that really hit me was the last scene where who is sitting on the plane next to the apocalypse scientist guy? It is the scientist from the future, that woman. Yeah. And she was in insurance. She was not in science whatsoever. So he's a scientist. She's not at that point. What if he's the one that brings her in, and then she becomes a scientist because of his influence, and they're the ones who found the society underground. They are trying to, and so so Bruce Willis has to fail. He has to fail to kill him. All the events has to go back. Bruce Willis has to go back to tell Goins, about the idea for the 12 monkeys, which sets things in motion, and that's how the scientist gets the virus. All the things set up. Even Plummer getting, basically signing away his own influence, saying, okay, I don't have any control over this now. I signed away my authorization, to these other guys. That is what enables the scientists to get this. All these things have to happen. So would the scientists not be aware of this and say, yeah, we better make sure that we take precautions so that nobody changes our future? What evidence do we have that the future is absolutely immutable? None. Whose word do we take on that that's true? Well, Bruce Willis says this, but where does he get that from? Well, he gets it from the scientists who tell him that. Well, of course, and do you think the scientists would tell him the truth? We know they've been lying to him about a number of things. So, why wouldn't they lie about this? So they are trying to create the stable time loop by sending people back at the points where they want them to go back. Maybe sending Bruce Willis to 1990 wasn't a mistake. Maybe that was on purpose. Any number of things that you could come up with to say, okay, this series of events happens the way that it has to happen because we want to make sure that we rule in the future.
Damn, Steve, you've blown my mind, and you've convinced.
What do you think of that one?
Wow. And once again, it makes sense. It's a conspiracy theory, but damn, when you start putting the pieces together, you're like, okay,
fits, man. It fits like puzzle pieces. It fits.
Yeah, and suddenly the powers that be put you in there, and you're going, yeah, it's all up like that. You're doing the Jeffrey Goins. So
it's great because it's not like the Terminator where like they blew up all the records in the thermonuclear war. They still have all those records, They didn't lose all their technology just because everybody died. Holy cow, dude! I think you've solved the riddle.
Yeah, that's crazy. All right, Adam. Follow up that one. Jeez.
Yeah, good
It's
luck.
gonna be tough. Time travel's never been one of my favorite topics, to be honest. It sometimes feels like that easy out sometimes when you want to fix things.
Yeah.
However, with this, I'm not wondering if being sent back to 1990 wasn't an accident, wasn't a mistake.
Yeah.
Maybe that was what, no matter what, you were going to get the same outcome.
I'll also add one thing that I forgot about. Why are they threatening to kill Bruce Willis at the end of the movie? Yeah. There would be what does it gain them to do that? Because they want to make sure that it benefits, that the time loop continues.
Well, I think they want to make sure, he gets killed.
Yeah, exactly.
Like their theory. So.
They know he dies. So.
Wow, I'm just shocked. So
that's what I love about this film. Like Adam said, like you hate the time travel easy out, but that's why I love this film because the immutable timeline, or at least the past, you don't get the easy out. It's like some of those old
and you don't get any easy answers. I mean, you can interpret whatever you want.
I'm going to start with Adam on this one, though, okay? Because this is kind of where I wanted to wrap it up, but this asks another question. And since we're comic crusaders and we're all comic book guys, I'm going to ask it to Adam first. How does this vision of time travel affect the concept of the multiverse? And if they brought that into like the MCU or something? What do you think?
I think it complicates things.
Yeah.
Because you're always going to have something that gives you that same outcome. Are you going to have multiple versions of the same outcome, regardless? You look at the most recent Doctor Strange episode, where it was the same, without spoiling anything, it was the same outcome no matter what you tried to change.
Okay.
Fixed point in time, like in Doctor Who.
Yeah.
I've got a little different idea, but that is definitely a valid point.
Like I said, I just makes me wonder. The whole, what is destined and what is free will.
Yeah.
Maybe some things are always meant to happen, and regardless of what you try to change in the past, you're going to still get those same outcomes.
It really makes you appreciate something like Star Trek, where they have the concept of, I forget what it is, the prime directive, where you don't interfere. It's like there should be a prime directive on time travel. It's like it's never a good idea to go back, because when you go back, you may be immutably setting the future, and your present and the future. So
there's an interesting one that Stephen King wrote in that I saw the TV movie version of it with James Franco, and it is kind of like meant to be immutable. The guy goes back in time to try to save JFK from being assassinated, and then the universe itself basically introduces new wrinkles to stop him from succeeding. So the universe itself, the laws of the universe, actually conspire against James Franco so that JFK dies because he must die at that moment.
Huh. Well, that's kind of like what we saw in The Boys, so that first time too, to a certain extent. So, and we talked about that.
I have not watched any of The Boys yet.
I don't know how much you're missing.
I thought some of it. Umbrella Academy.
Yeah. Oh, that's right. I'm not. Yeah, not The Boys. I correct myself. Not The Boys. Umbrella Academy. And once again, I don't know how much you're missing. So, some of it's good. Some of it.
Well, you're missing Five fighting the Swedes to the tune of "Kiss."
Yeah, that is outstanding. The Five fights them to the tune of "I Was Made for Loving You" by Kiss. Great fight scene. So, yeah, we're checking out. Jeff, go ahead and hit this one, and then I'm going to throw my comments in, and then we're going to wrap this thing up.
I can actually hit this from a direct comic book source. One of my all-time favorite artists is John Byrne. And John Byrne always tried to approach his Fantastic Four as if he was writing a science fiction novel series. He tried to be as scientifically accurate as he was in a pseudoscience sort of way, a la Star Trek, as he could. It made sense. Reed Richards is the preeminent scientist of the world. And so here's how the Marvel Universe handled time travel and divergent realities and multiverses. There was a particular issue where Ben Grimm tried to go back into the past as he, Reed had made this formulation that's supposed to turn him back into a human. And Ben tried it, and Reed's like, oh, man, it didn't work because this would have worked on you in your early days when you had more like, rhino or dinosaur hide, but, your body's become comfortable with the mutation. Now you've developed this rocky hide. As people or longtime readers know, that the thing started out, he was more of a big orange oatmeal lump of a character, a very Jack Kirby design, before becoming the rocky form that has become his classic. So Ben got the idea to use Doctor Doom's time platform, zap himself back into the past, and he has a fight with himself and forces himself to take the formula that does turn him into Ben Grimm in the past, and he goes back to the future expecting to be Ben Grimm. When he's not, Reed has to explain what happens to him, explaining that the past is incredibly robust and it will work against you because it's happened. So there have been periods in Ben's career where he had turned periodically human over time, and he said that's become the reason now, because you went back in the past, not as your body was kind of mutating and changing along the way. And at the same time that you did that, you've also created a divergent reality, because this is a very important point in that history. Now, in some cases, Marvel's kind of gone off the rails. Thanos has a talk with like the one above all in front of Adam Warlock. He's like, there's a reality, like I'm scratching my nose now. So is there another reality where I'm not scratching my nose at this exact moment? I think it has to deal, from what I've seen, it has to deal with like key important moments in time. And that's kind of the whole basis of Doctor Who. He's there to fix things that are affecting key moments in time, and sometimes just observing those fixed moments in time when you can't really do anything about it. And that, like Doctor Who and like the Stephen King JFK book, those moments when time and space and reality will fight against you because some things are just supposed to happen. In that case, the past. So that's the way I look at it. The past is largely immutable, and if you can't affect the past, well, you've actually just kind of stepped into you haven't really changed your past. You've actually stepped into an alternate reality where this sort of thing was supposed to happen, and that's what the Marvel Universe multiverse is.
Okay. All right. I was thinking of something a little bit different. When we were talking about this, I think it would be kind of cool to explore in comics where the present is immutable, your present, and the past is infinitely mutable. And so presents are warring with each other to change the past so that their present becomes the present.
Oh,
And
it's
so,
Steve's theory again.
yep. And so you are constantly going back, and eventually, if the past moves too far away from your present, then your present dies out and becomes extinct.
But then you get the whole chicken and the egg. If you have these multitude of presents fighting over the past, then whose past was really that present's past?
Exactly.
How did all these present? That'd be a fun thing to write about, though, man.
Wouldn't it?
That's a fascinating way to look at it.
Yeah, and it would just it would be, and the wars and the 5D chess you would have to play.
Yep.
And yeah, I mean,
literally fourth dimensional chess.
Yeah, you would really, your mind would just start going nuts at some point trying to figure it all out. But it'd be fun. It'd be fun insanity. So, all right. So I think this has been a great discussion. I think we could keep going on this forever. Unfortunately, we don't want to have like a 5-hour podcast, for people to try to slog through. So let's go ahead and wrap this one up.
Like the other YouTubers.
We could do that sometime. That might be fun to do, but think about that. But for right now, let's go ahead and wrap this one up. I'm going to start with Adam and go around the horn. Let's give our ratings out of 10 for this film, and then we'll go ahead and call this one a day. So, Adam,
I'm giving it an 8.
An 8 out of 10?
I'm giving it an 8, and it's only because I take 2 points off because, once again, audio description, if it was there and I was able to appreciate the visual aspects of this, I may have enjoyed the movie a little bit more. But, I know people that are like Jeff, and it was just scary accurate. I love this movie.
Cool, great. Steve, what do you think?
I'm kind of leaning to 8.5. I mean, this movie is really, really great. I can't really fault very much at all about it. And it's a movie that really makes you think, like, long after. It's eminently rewatchable. The visuals are great. I mean, it's certainly Terry Gilliam has done an amazing job with the direction of this. Like I said, they really improved on the short film massively in every respect. I think the acting's very good, from Willis to Stowe to Pitt. I mean, and Christopher Plummer and all the other ones. So yeah, I really enjoyed this one. It's a science fiction classic, and for good reason.
Outstanding. Jeff, what do you think?
I'm going to reiterate, just for Adam's benefit, that when I watch a movie that's subtitled, sometimes, like, we'll see things like, like it'll say not just what people are saying, but, like, creak of the step, somebody's steps, like, sound of, like, the scurrying of a mouse in the background. They get that detail with it. Guys, if you're catering to the deaf like that, as you should, there is a market out there for people who cannot see these movies and enjoy them the way the rest of us can. Put some serious thought into doing this. Like,
that's it. I mean, like, annoys me is that I just not even know. Blind people do watch movies.
Yeah, and we've been talking about this a lot, and I think I'm going to talk to Al about it and make it a focus. I think we need to make a campaign out there. It's not difficult. They're already putting alternate audio on these films. Yeah. So, bring it.
It'd be great, even if it's just something like, if the movie pauses and you've got, like, this kind of godlike noir narrators, like, the device was a sphere covered with multiple lenses, camera staring at him like eyes of some insect on this bizarre articulated arm. And then Adam could go, oh, okay, he's in this 12-foot chair and all this stuff is going on.
Yeah, but bring in Morgan Freeman to read it. Everybody loves Morgan Freeman. So,
as for rating the movie, I'm going to give this a 9.5, only because I don't like to give anything a perfect score. It's hard for me to say, like, okay, this is perfect in every way. So I feel like, despite my experience being so overwhelmingly positive, there's probably something I've missed somewhere, or maybe I can make a nitpick, but this film for me is one of those rare films that's as close to perfect as it can get. I mean, just everything about it is so good. I can't even think of anything to critique about it.
Okay, cool. I think I'm going to give this movie a 9. Once again, mostly because I don't usually give out 10s. I'm not sure why it would be a 9.5 for me, but 9 feels right, so I'm going to go with it. Somehow I think I've come back from my future to tell my past to give it a 9, so I'm going to give it a 9. And it's immutable. I can't change it. I'm sorry. It's just the way it is. So I think so that would put us at 18 plus
875,
35. Yeah, something like it. 875. So looks like the rating on IMDb was an 8. So we like it a little bit better than IMDb, but we're pretty close, like we usually are. And so I would say definitely, folks, check this movie out. It's worth the time. It's a classic. It's a staple of science fiction from the 90s. I'd say it's a staple of science fiction period now. It's that good a movie. It has a lot of themes that it brings up, and it's relevant with what we're going through in our real life now too. So, I think it's enjoyable. And I don't think, I'm going to say this right off the bat, when I realized just how much this movie was tied into a pandemic, I thought about calling this one off and doing something different. But I don't think it's so tied into the pandemic that it is going to scare you versus a movie like Outbreak. I will not touch Outbreak or Andromeda Strain until COVID is a thing of the past, because that, I think, really hits a little bit too close to home right now. So.
Yeah, the pandemic doesn't really, it's just really more like a vehicle to get you where the movie needs you to go. It's not really about the pandemic. It's more about the time travel and the insanity.
Yeah. So if you're worried about that with this movie, I would say don't worry about that. If you are, though, I would say, steer clear of things like Outbreak right now, because Outbreak takes what's going on right now and elevates it to 5,000, and it could really scare you.
I watched a clip from Outbreak, and I couldn't even handle it.
Yeah, so that one is definitely, that is one that's probably a little too close to home at the moment. So with that said, I want to thank my co-host. Thank you so much, Adam, for being here with us.
My pleasure. Thank you for always allowing me to be a part of the dais, man.
Absolutely. We always appreciate you coming on here. You are always welcome. And love doing this with you. I want to thank Jeff. Thank you so much.
Always a pleasure. I would also like to throw out a special thanks to Adam's dog, who's on the bed back there.
Yeah.
Just for showing up.
And I want to thank my good friend Steve Shadwick Sellers. Thank you so much for joining me on here.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. I'm also going to throw a shout out to Lance Lucero from Warehouse 9, because he was the one who really brought La Jetée to our attention, and we talked about it a little bit here. So I figure he deserves some credit for that.
And Lance is a font of knowledge when it comes to classic film, to stuff like this. I'm sure he could have brought stuff as far as the technical aspect of what Gilliam's done. That would have blown all of our minds. So, Lance really knows his stuff when it comes to filmmaking. So, but I know he's having fun climbing a mountain right now, having a good time. And I hope
did he make the top yet?
What's that?
Did he make the top yet?
I don't know. I hope so.
I know he says he's trying to beat the weather, so climb, man.
Yep.
Climb.
And I hope we see him back here for the next episode of Cinema Crusaders. So, and I hope we see all of you out there for the next Cinema Crusaders too. So until the next time, we're going to take a break here, and we're going to say bye on behalf of Cinema Crusaders, and let's all go to the lobby.
Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat.
Delicious things to eat.
The popcorn can't be beat. The sparkling drinks are just dandy. The chocolate bars and the candy. So let's all go to the lobby to get ourselves a treat. Let's all go to the lobby.